our role in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll be handing it off to Abby Fenton, and our wonderful art students will be bragging about all of the awards that they've earned.
Okay. Welcome to the work session for May 4th of the Abington Heights School District. Would everyone please stand and pledge the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, I am working on it. I apologize. Thank you.
Mr. Abdallah?
Here.
Mr. Azar?
Here.
Mr. Fleming?
Here.
Mrs. Henderson?
Here.
Mrs. Karam?
Here.
Mr. Budensky? Here. Mr. Robeson?
Here.
Mrs. Tierney?
Here.
Mr. Acker?
Here.
Everyone's present.
Can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Schaefer, can we have the superintendent's report, please?
Sure. We will start off by introducing Miss Abby Fenton and our team of wonderful high school artists.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Abby Fenton, and I am from the Abington Heights High School Art Department. I'd like to introduce my fellow art teachers, Michelle Fangio and Tim Butler, as well as a few of our talented students, Allison Klaas, Robert Earl DeLucy, David Pease, and Maura Yang are all juniors at the high school, and they're very active in the arts programming. We are here tonight to tell you about some of our exciting happenings and highlights from this year in our community and beyond. The Scholastic's National Art and Writing Awards are the nation's longest-running, most prestigious recognition program for creative teens. It's open to grades 7 through 12. The Scholastic Awards start at the regional level with our region's entries judged and winners displayed at the Everhart Museum in Squanton. Winners are presented with a gold key, a silver key, or an honorable mention. Gold key winners move on to the national competition, which is judged, awarded, and displayed in New York City. So following are this year's regional winners.
This is the section for the 5th annual Our Town High School Student Art Show, the scholarship and awards at the Gathering Place. For the last 5 years, Abington Heights High School students have been invited to participate in an art show at the Gathering Place in Clark Summit. The work is that of juniors and seniors and is considered for awards in the categories of drawing, painting, photography, and mixed media. This year's program was a combined project of the Gathering Place and the Abington Civics League. Funds for the monetary awards were raised through a grant, private donations, and the sale of note cards made by a local artist, Shirley Egan. Following is the artwork of the award winners and highlights from this show.
Squanton Times Art for All Seasons, Artist of the Month. Each year, the Squanton Times hosts an art contest called Art for All Seasons. High school art students in the region are invited to create works for arts that represent one of the 4 seasons. One piece is chosen for each month of the year, and it's featured on the front page of the lifestyle section of the newspaper above the monthly activity calendar. Out of only 12 winners in the region, Abington Heights High School has 2 of them, Kyle Monthly for the month of August and More Young for the month of October. Look for our artists and their work in the Squanton Times during their featured month.
Wvia, Artists of the Week. This television campaign is designed to call attention to high school students who have excelled in the studies of arts. Each participating high school selects 2 students, 1 visual artist and 1 performing artist, who will be interviewed by the Wvia studio for a 1-minute vignette. The Artist of the Week spot showcases the student, high school, and the school's district and salutes them for their artistic achievements on the Wvia TV for 1 week and the Wvia.org for 1 year. Our selected high school visual artist this year was Kyle Munley. Bloomsburg University, Art Major for the Day and Portfolio Review. Last week, interested juniors and seniors from the Art 2 and Advanced Studio Art classes took a field trip to Bloomsburg University's Art Department. We toured the facility and had opportunities to sit in on multiple studios and art history classes. There were many lessons and projects for us, including mono prints on fabric, inflatable sculptures, a dry point etching, printmaking project, still life drawing, and fun in the photography lighting studio. The faculty also took the time to meet with each student from our group individually to review our portfolios and give us helpful feedback. They kept some of our work for display in the upcoming high school art show, and they were all eligible to win awards or scholarships for our work. Here are some photos from that day.
And finally, we'd like to invite you to join us at our district's end-of-the-year art shows in each building. Following are the dates and times. We hope to see you there. Thank you for inviting us tonight and for your continued support.
Actually, you should never start a sentence with I'm a little speechless with pride here. I just want to give me a second here. Since January, we've been talking about Abington Heights and our performance. We started by talking about academics. We pivoted to post-secondary success. We talked about 2-year, 4-year persistence. We've had the opportunity to see our performing artists at the high school. We've had the opportunity to see our young musicians. And now we've had the opportunity to see these wonderful, gifted artists. And I see the same people sitting here at all of our board meetings, and I hope they are absorbing the same thing that I am, and that is just this wonderful multidisciplinary approach to education that our students are receiving. Congratulations to our teachers. It's Teacher Appreciation Week. And what better way to spend it than to take a look? Students, I'm in awe, and if any of you would like to loan any of those art pieces that we could put in the central office, I would certainly put them up. So thank you so much. As a token of appreciation, Dr. Vitale and I are going to give you some certificates of appreciation.
You know, guys, I also think Dr. Schaefer's in a new house with lots of empty walls, so, you know, maybe you can help him out.
Thank you, guys. You spoke so well. Congratulations. So Robert Earl DeLucy. Allison Klotz. David Pease. And Moore Yang.
I'm going to begin tonight's presentation with a brief presentation on some of our short and long-term facilities timelines. And then I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Mirabelli, who will start our presentation on the preliminary budget. First thing I wanted to do, and a little bit of this is a reiteration of what I talked about at our last board meeting, and providing some context to some of our short-term and long-term facilities goals. What you see in front of you is a table of all of our schools, the original construction date, the dates when we had a renovation, acreage, grades served, pupil capacity, and enrollment. The average age of our buildings is 60 years with a median age of 61 and a half. And I mention that because we've had, I believe, 3 to 4 renovations. Mr. Mirabelli and I have been looking through the bonds, trying to figure out exactly how much money that we have spent on those major renovations. Needless to say, when we have buildings with a median age of 61, we know that we are going to have to take care of some major work. And that's exactly why we have put out an RFP for a K-12 facility assessment. What I would like to share with you today as an overview is some feedback from our community, our parents, students, and teachers on our district-wide student survey. We'll have more survey results in the coming months. We had over 4,000 responses from students, parents, and teachers. It's a lot of information to go through, but it's very important perceptual data. The first slide that I want to show you is some facility responses from the high school community. A question that we ask is the school in good condition? And as you can see, 52% of our parents said yes, and 41% of our students, and 25% of our teachers. We then asked if they had indicated that they felt the school was not in good condition, to tell us what areas we needed to prioritize. And as you could see, parents had indicated that bathrooms, classrooms, flooring, a whole myriad of things that we needed to take a look at. We saw the same thing from our students and teachers. So that is something that will help to inform the board as we receive the K-12 facility assessment sometime in the late fall. What are our teachers, students, and parents noticing? What are we noticing? And then what are we learning from the comprehensive facility assessment? The next was in the middle school. These were lower percentages when constituents were asked if the school was in good condition. 43% of the parents said yes, 57% students, and 2% teachers. You can see the bathrooms at the middle school was very high, same with the classrooms. An interesting note that I've shared with the board members and the administrators is I have a superintendent's advisory council at every school of students. And I went to every elementary school and I just asked the students, what do we need to improve on? What do you like? And it didn't take long to talk about bathrooms and classrooms, which was surprising to me. And I got that at all three levels. So it was heartening to hear that and also see that in the responses on the survey, that I saw a pattern there. And it also was somewhat disheartening to know and to hear that from the students, and that is an area that we all need to improve. Finally, we have the facility responses from the elementary schools, which were slightly higher than what we saw at the high school and the middle school. And this is up on the website, so you can grab this information. But again, we see things like the bathrooms and the classrooms and flooring and lighting, that these are consistent points that our constituents are mentioning that need improvement. My final slide here is to frame how our short-term and long-term goals will work in tandem, and how we'll leverage the time in front of us, given the capacity of our organization, our leadership to manage projects happening across our facilities. This March through June, the board approved a facility assessment in RFP. This was for the sole purpose of long-term projects. We have received approximately 12 to 13 responses. Our facilities committee has developed a rubric and will be evaluating all of those proposals. They will then interview vendors. We will then do checks, visits, and then we will come to the board with a recommendation for a vendor who will complete the facility assessment. In that same time, we administered a district-wide survey to gather information from our parents, students, and faculty about our facilities. Also, we took a look at our short-term projects. What could we accomplish now to better utilize and leverage the time that we have before going on to a long-term project, knowing that a facility assessment will take months to occur. In this same window, we are approving the budget for next year. July through December, the facility assessment vendor will begin evaluating all buildings and talking with leadership. This is, again, a long-term project. The successful vendor, it would be our intended timeline to approve a vendor by June so they could get to work in July and August, getting into all of our facilities, doing a thorough and comprehensive evaluation in order to put together a report. During this time, Quad 3, the approved fields and seating project vendor, will begin project permitting, planning, and ordering with the intention of completing a project by December. This would be a short-term project, which we talked about last board meeting at the high school in the fields. This would keep us away from core facilities, because what we don't want to do is invest money into some facilities that will become part of our long-term plan and then have to take out that work that we just spent money on. January through March, and this would be 2023, the approved high school project vendor would begin work on the seating press box expansion. That again is a short-term project ahead of what would happen in the long term. We need to be cognizant of our time and our ability to manage projects, also to take advantage of and appropriately use our capital reserve to improve the facilities and using the funds that we have. January through March, again, we had hoped to receive the K-12 facility assessment, and we begin to synthesize and discuss those results. It will be a very lengthy report, very comprehensive in nature, every building from basement to roof to the exterior. April through June, we'll solicit public input on the long-term facility investments, much like we did in the survey, and also working with groups of parents, students, and teachers to hear their thoughts. We'll make some final decisions regarding facilities investments. These are long-term projects. Again, at that same time, April through June next year, we'll be approving the school year 24 budget. From July to September of 23, the proposed seating project would be complete, and the school board would pursue long-term project funding and project planning. So after we decided what those priorities are, what are the next steps? October through December, the long-term project planning and preparation would continue, whatever that may be. And then January through December, construction, renovation, whatever that would be. And again, I'm being a little vague here because I don't know. We don't know what the report will say. However, I wanted to provide a timeline because we put out a K-12 facility assessment. It won't come back in a month. We won't be able to make a decision in a month, and we won't be able to start renovation in a month. These are long-term projects that require permitting. They require a lot of architectural work. They require a lot of finance work. So what I wanted to do today was, again, provide some context for some of the short-term and long-term projects that we have ahead of us. At this time, I'm going to throw it over to Jim, who will be engaged in the preliminary budget report.
So we're talking budget again. Sorry to have my back to you again, I apologize. Always a pleasure to talk finance and budget with you all. Thank you for the time to do so. Last month, we talked a little bit about where we've been, how we've spent, how we stack up against other districts. We saw that we're a very lean district, a very low spending district, also a very low revenue district. We saw those comparables on a percentage basis and also on a per pupil basis and how that ranked statewide. We talked about some comparisons. We had a few requests for more comparisons, which I've included for you here tonight. We talked a lot about the stimulus funds. We talked a lot about the 10 or so positions that we hired with the stimulus funds. And we also talked about the fiscal cliff that has created going forward. So in the context of all of that, so we talked about where we've been, where we're going. We talked about the inflection point that really is this year. We want to talk about the preliminary budget for 2022-2023. So I want to give you an overview of what that looks like. In your folders, both digitally and in print, you have this presentation as well as what I'm calling a draft of the preliminary budget, the budget that we're working on that will be up for vote in 2 weeks from tonight. Okay. And I've opened the wrong. I've opened last month's budget report. I do apologize. Give me 1 second. I'm very sorry for much apologize for that. Little technical glitch, right? What I'd like to do first is talk about those couple of slides that we requested additional information on. And what we were discussing last week was sort of a percentage of instruction of the budget, percent of instruction as compared to the whole budget. And folks were wondering what that looked like on a per pupil basis and how that compared to our peers, the state average, and our regional folks here. What you see here is district-wide salary and benefits. So that's all salary and benefits paid per pupil, right? So you take the total salary and benefits and divide by the total number of pupils to normalize that. And then we compared it against our peer average, which is the NEIU 19. The peer average is groups of schools who are like us, socioeconomic groups, enrollment like us, size, budget size, as well as the state average in spending. And you can see the trend. We sort of stay along with everyone in the beginning of the trend, and then we begin to reduce positions over time, and you can see where we fall back of all three of those peer groups. So that's total spending on salary and benefits. How does that look in instructional spending? We correlate much more closely in instructional spending on salary and benefits as it compares to the state average and our peer group average over this time. And in the next year, which is not captured here, where we hired the additional 10 positions, you would see that actually come up above our peer group and above the state average, but not necessarily above the NEIU average. And now this is total instructional spending. So this includes salary, benefits, supplies, all instructional spending. And you can see, even though we compare when you talk about salaries and benefits in the instructional category, when you look at everything else, we're lean on supplies. We're lean on things that we spend on instruction in that category. Instruction means things in the classroom, right? It actually also means it could be subcontracted instruction, or unfortunately charter schools would fall in this instructional category of spending as well. So you can see we're pretty comfortably spending less per pupil on instructional expenses, but the place in instruction that we're spending the most on does very well compare in salary and benefits to the other peer groups here. The other question we got was, a major driver of per pupil analysis is enrollment, right? You take your cost, you divide by your enrollment. And here is the NEIU 19, all of the schools' enrollment over the past decade or so, right? And what I will say is almost every district declined over that period of time. In fact, the average decline from 2010 to 2021 was 13% in the NEIU and a 10% decline across the state of Pennsylvania. Abington Heights' decline was 4%. So we're not declining as quickly as the rest of the state. So for those who asked for this information, does that satisfy your requests? Okay. So now let's get into the 2022-23 preliminary budget, and where do we spend our money, right? And we've seen a presentation like this last time, and that was more of a historical perspective. This compares the current year's budget versus the draft preliminary budget, and you can see largely the same percentages with a tick up in salaries and a tick up in supplies as far as percent of the whole are concerned. And we'll take a look in some detail as to why that is. The next slide is a complete breakdown as to by object, as we would call it, and I have a slide next that explains what object level breakdown is. But I wanted to be fully transparent as to where these variances are, what we're spending as compared to what our last actual audited year was, 2021, our current year budget, and the proposed 2023 budget. And you can see the variances in between the 21-22 and the 22-23 budget. And there are some significant variances there. And I'll explain those. The largest variance here is clearly salaries. It costs to give everyone a raise in the district when you consider the salary and the fixed cost is approximately $800,000 each year. Your salary base, if all positions remain, is about an $800,000 salary and benefit escalator. So what makes up that $978,000 is approximately a 3% increase, which is commensurate with the collective bargaining agreements that are in place. It also provides for an additional 1.5 professional staff members, which was outlined in the memo to the community. So you'll see that there. And one in-house clerical, which is actually, it's been in place for some time now. It's just when you consider budget to budget, we didn't, it actually happened in the 2021 or 21-22 year, but wasn't accounted for in the 2021 budget year. So it didn't get in the budget quick enough. So there's a variance on the budgetary basis there. So employee benefits, we're seeing an increase in the pension rate and benefit costs related to those salaries above. So a higher salary base drives out higher pension and FICA costs, Social Security costs as well. Purchase professional service, we removed the cost of athletic trainer because of our agreement with Lehigh Valley Health Network. So we used to pay for one health trainer, but I believe we get up to, is that 3? Up to 3 trainers at no cost to the district as part of our agreement there. So, so we see a negative number or a positive variance there. That was partially offset by some additional professional development that is in this budget. And also deducting one subcontracted clerical. So the clerical that's added in the top line was deducted in the professional service line. On the purchase property services, we see an increase in subcontracted custodial costs as custodians retire and come out of the salary and benefit line item. They go into the purchase property services line. And that is at a reduced cost per position to the district there. So you do see an increased cost there. And that, that's a factor of folks coming out of the salary into the subcontracted line there. Other purchase services, this is the cyber charter schools driving up this line item. We have some field trips that we've included in here. It's sort of an initiative to centralize and streamline the elementaries in doing all of the same field trips across the board. So I thought that was noteworthy, not a huge line item, but I thought a noteworthy one to put out, as well as bus and van contracted increases. The state formula, which we pay, actually is a 7% increase this year based on inflationary measures. So our bus contract will go up by that number next year. Supplies, we have a 9.5% increase, and that's largely due to a lot of the instructional initiatives that have been discussed over the last, say, 4 months or so. So we have various consumables and things of that nature in the instructional category, as well as utility rates increasing. We've done our best to lock up utilities as far as we could. It's just those contracts will run out, and we'll end up having to do the best we can in the market at a point next year. So we will be seeing some utility rate increases there. And then the final line item is just budgetary reserve or contingency. We backed that down. Last year we had a very high contingency because there was great uncertainty in the COVID year. So contingency doesn't mean you're going to spend it. It just gives you a vehicle to do so should unanticipated costs come up. So we have $250,000 contingency in there where there was closer to, I believe, $600,000 last year, which largely remained unspent. Here is, there's a lot of text on this page, but if you're interested in those two, that breakdown of what makes up those, what we call objects, this is everything that is in those various categories that I described there. And this is posted on the website as well for anyone who wants to take a look at it. Now, the other way to look at things, this is the very same group of expense, except for the PDE account code structure provides for objects, which shows you those categories, salaries, benefits, which is very handy, but also functions, which gives you instruction, support services, non-instructional services. So these are the very same expenses categorized in a different way. So if you look at where the increases are, they are in largely where you want them to be, right? In instruction and support services. These are, the instruction is student-driven, and you see the variance largely to all of the reasons I've already mentioned. I'm not going to re-explain why they're there, but you can see where the variances in the categories actually are, and the explanation for what is in each of those categories. Anyone have any questions on the expense side of the equation? Michelle?
Yeah, back at the salary, 1.5 professional increase. What happened to the 10 positions, the 10 additional positions?
That's a great question. So those 10 positions were in the current year budget. So I'm giving you an analysis of what's different, right? So the budget is largely status quo except these items, right? So those 10 positions are already accounted for in the current year budget. I'm explaining to you what's different between the current year and next year, what we're proposing.
Okay, so when you showed us the pie of last year, okay, and you have employee benefits, 31%. I believe it's also 31% on the other side. How is that not increased?
Because the rest of the budget also increases. The pie is larger. The slice is the same, but the pie is larger. And you'll see in total, right? So the total budget goes from 52.4 to 54.2, $1.8 million increase in expenses.
Okay, my next question is, you have cyber charter expenses categorized with something else. Would it be possible to just see the expenses of the charter?
It's 1.65 million is what we're budgeting.
That's what you're budgeting?
1.65.
1.65. And what was last year's?
2 million. We're trending at around 1.7. There's been, Dr. Schaefer has been doing some work on bringing some folks back. I don't know if you want to note that, or, but that is my current best estimate of where I think we'll be. It could be low, it could be high.
Well, it's great to see that it's on a downward trend. I know we have to budget for a lot, but it's nice. It's nice to see that it's trending down. That bill. Okay.
Hopefully, regression to the mean would be great at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to make, and one of the key drivers that Jim mentioned in the Budget 101 was in 2019 and 20, the charter school expenditures were $981,000, and last year it was 1,988. We've almost gone up $1 million. Now, I think Jim said we were projecting 175, 18. It's hard to tell, but we have started reaching out to all of our families and having individual discussions with them, trying to find out why they left, what we could do better to gain their trust back and to come back to Abington Heights. So that has been happening slowly. And we will continue to reach out through the summer to get hopefully our parents, our Abington Heights parents and students back in the district.
The Abington Heights extended, what is it, the other program that we have,
Abington Heights Virtual Academy?
Virtual Academy?
Yes.
Is that increased? Is that taken away from some of the charter?
Not
Enrollment?
yet, but we're working on marketing and doing a better job of getting it out there. We were concerned that starting mid-year that people wouldn't make the transition, but our hope is that some of our cyber charter families will transition back into our virtual academy next school year. So we're working on kind of a marketing plan just to let people know what we're offering.
And that will be a big savings, right, when they transfer back?
Considerable.
Okay, thank you.
You know, it's interesting when you look at this, the cyber charter cost of $1,650,000 versus the increase in expenses of $1,700,000. Basically, every dollar you reduce that cyber charter produces the deficit we're dealing with.
It does. It's a very significant expense, and we haven't begun to absorb it. We haven't begun to match revenue with that expense. And the same is true for some other line items, over time. Was there another question? Mr. Medinsky?
Yeah, just to clarify, to piggyback from Michelle, the 10 new positions we ordered, or created, which were all the right things to do, but those were being paid by the funding we were getting from the state or the federal government, PESers, right?
Yeah, with the stimulus funds.
With the stimulus
correct.
funds,
So
thank you.
Okay, we'll get
so
about.
that 1.6 million increase that's seen from the 2021-22 budget to the next year, is that the real reason for that 1.6 million increase? Well, we see
Where you,
last year's budget or this year's budget to next year's budget, there's 1.6 million, over 1.6 million in salary and employee benefits. What's driving that 1.6 million?
largely salary and benefits, along with these other reconciling items that.
But those 10 individuals that we just hired, where is that in this equation? When did that start and when is it?
So those individuals are in this, this current year's budget. Right?
Okay.
On top of those salaries being in this year's budget, all employees receive a raise, which is approximately $800,000.
So, yeah, okay. So that 1.6 million is raises and benefits to our existing employees. Now, my question is when we no longer get that funding, what's that going to mean? Because that's only for what, 2-3 years?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. So 2.5 years. Now what happens?
Well, we'll have some.
We don't have that revenue coming in.
We'll have some decisions to make. And I'm leading you down this path, just not to suggest anything 2 years from now, but just to provide the reality of, where we're at and where we're going.
I was about to say, Jim's going to get a slide to that, and to answer your question, I'm trying to remember what that number is, but I think we lose probably around $700,000 to $800,000 falls off at the end of next year, and then the remaining $800 the following year.
We have a slide for that.
There
So
we go.
We'll show you that.
See how
Yes,
close I am
yes.
on that.
So those are the major budget drivers on the expense equation. And we can go line item by line item. And there's a detailed budget in your folder, and will be one uploaded to the website as well. Let's see. Is that all? Yes, sir.
What does it cost per year per student for cyber school? Do you know that?
I do. So it's approximately $11,000 for a regular ed student and $21,000 for a special ed student. So when they say it's free, it's not free to us. It's free to the families. Yes.
I just want to dig into that a little deeper that Greg was talking about. So if the salary and benefit, I understand the 10 teachers were in this year's budget. If the contractual increases of salaries and benefits for everybody accounts for 800,000 of increase. But the salary and benefits line items go up by double that between this year and next year. Why is that? Why is there an additional 800,000 in salary and benefits? That's what I'm not following that difference. If you show the variance of salary and benefits up there is almost $1 million and almost $700,000, about 1.6 something, right? But
Sure.
if the bump in the contractual bumps account for 800, but we didn't hire anybody new this year, is there some new hires in that number in addition to the 10 that are, or something that's in there?
Yes. Yeah, so that's the 1.5 professional staff, and these are just the main highlights. There are a number of other, changes such as column movement, which is in addition to the 3%.
So that's, right.
So I say approximately 3%, but behind that salary number is a name, a real salary, really what we expect them to pay, the exact benefit percentage, what we project. We still don't know what the health insurance projection is. We're meeting with our advisors in the next 2 weeks, but we have a rough estimate for health insurance. The pension rate also increased, so it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, right? So you're paying 34% one year, and then you're paying 36%. So that's a considerable amount when you're talking about applying it to a $25 million number. 2% of that is a big expense on the benefit side. So what I try to do is call out the main things here. So yes, there are additional positions there, and it may have been captured, like a part of the 10 we may not have captured exactly in the 21-22 budgetary year. It may be, like, for example, a class size reduction teacher came in after the fact. I wouldn't know that as of when I'm presenting that to the board on June 25th. But then you find out kindergarten registration is, through the roof, and a class size reduction teacher comes in. Well, that's $110,000 I didn't have in the budget, right? So that's the flaw in a budget-to-budget analysis, because there's 2 snapshots in time. So what I'm just trying to do is convey to you the main changes between the 2 budgets to show what initiatives are going forth, what the major cost drivers are, and a general explanation of what that's for. Now, we can really get down in the weeds, and I could go position by position with you, because we do have that detail. But this is just meant to be a general overview to help folks kind of hone in on some things as to where it is. But rest assured, there's a name or position, a salary, and to the fact that when a position's not filled, we have an estimate as to where we think that person will come in, and that's there's no padded figures in there for a salary or anything like that. And again, I make those available to anybody who wants to see. So. Okay, so now we're on to the revenue side of the equation. And again, largely the same proportions, just a different number here. And you can see we have some revenue growth there. And part of that revenue growth here is in the local tax side. And when we talk about revenue and these rising expenses and being starved for revenue, and the initiatives that we see coming, we talk about a need for additional revenue here. So when we sort of take the temperature of the room on where we're going and where we need to be, we're lean. We don't have a lot of places to cut to make up for, to pay for these initiatives, and to pay, quite frankly, for what we have, right? To pay these increases. So included in this local line item is a 3.4% recommended tax increase here, right? And a word on that, and that's a recommendation. It's not a final determination or decision by anyone, including if you are to approve a 3.4% preliminary budget tax increase. That does not mean that we will raise taxes by 3.4% in June. The only thing it does is leave it open, and it communicates to your constituents that this is on the table, right? What I wouldn't do, it's either bad business, I'm not sure if it's illegal, but it's bad business if you plan to raise taxes in June. It's bad business to approve a 0 here and then do 3.4 or something in between in June. So, we've used this approach before, and we've said, here, this is what 3.4% looks like. If we're putting this on the table for you all, but I would not recommend reducing the rate to 0 in the preliminary budget and then later surprising people with something greater than what is approved in the preliminary budget. So, yes,
What's the maximum percentage?
3.4.
That's the max?
That's the max. Yeah, Abington Heights has a low poverty level, so our index is the lowest in the state. Ours is the base index. Some folks are as high as 5.5. So we don't have a lot of opportunity to raise tax, and actually 3.4 is the highest it's been in some time. With last year being an exception.
And Jim, what would that bring in? What is that?
I have that for you in just a second. So that's the breakdown, local, state, and federal. And here is a breakdown of the local revenues, as you see it. And what do I have an explanation? Yeah, I have the explanations here. So here's the highlights. Current real estate taxes. We increased the real estate millage by 3.4% in this analysis. And there was a nominal increase in our assessed value, nominal, like 0.2%. So some years we'll get a really nice appreciation of our mill that helps you not raise taxes. This year was not one of them. We have a ton of tax appeals rolling in, a ton of big-time commercial tax appeals that are eroding our tax base. We also have buildings that have been knocked down that we no longer have taxes on. And we are really rooting for them to get built back up quickly, right? And then we also, taking a look at the collection rate, last year going into the, in a pandemic year, we thought, boy, recession may be, we have to raise our delinquent tax rate and lower our current real estate tax rate because people may be struggling. That was the thought process across the state at the time. So we lowered our collection rate. As a result, this year we're collecting more current, but we're facing a negative variance on the delinquent side. So in next budget year, we raised the collection rate above its actually historic average that we're using because we're seeing really strong current collections. But you see a negative variance there of $175,000 in delinquent real estate taxes. And quite frankly, that's a good variance you want to see because that shows your taxpayer's ability to pay. Earned income tax, we see that going up by about $100,000 based on trend. Again, a recession comes along, all bets are off on these, but we don't get too aggressive with our revenue forecasts, but we think that is right about where we'll end up. And we'll continue to analyze these through the coming month and a half or so as we work toward the general fund final budget. But we'll refine these as they go. But these are the highlights on the local revenue side. State revenue. Now the state put out, the governor put out a beautiful proposal that would benefit the district. Unfortunately, the governor never gets what he wants, right? So we are not counting on what the governor proposed because it doesn't happen, right? So we have in here a conservative increase in the basic ed subsidy over the current year. We're hoping for something greater than that, and if the governor gets his way and we get a six-figure increase or more in our subsidy, we'd be very grateful. I don't see that happening. None of my colleagues see that happening in the area.
So, Mr. Mirabelli, I know in the past we talked about the equation for new money, and they were playing around with the idea of what it would look like, and the thought was in the future it may hurt Abington Heights unless we're held harmless. Did we ever hit that situation?
Have we hit it? No. There's still, the new money that comes in is subject to the new formula, but that's new money going through. So largely, you'll get whatever you got in 2000 and whenever they enacted this, 16 we'll call it. So largely, you got that. Even if your district continues to decline, you'll still get the hold harmless amount. Now, new money though, now let me go back to the enrollment slide. So new money, now you go through a calculation, right? And you come up with a number, and then that number gives you your percentage of the state's pie, right? Now, there's other carve-outs for, for Philly and Pittsburgh. Squanton has a carve-out. But the basic ed subsidy, as it flows through, right, the FTE count, the enrollment count, I'm sorry, not FTE, the enrollment count, weighted average daily membership, I believe they call it, is a major driver. The number of kids is a major driver of the amount of subsidy that you get. The good thing about this trend, Abington Heights falling 4% while the rest of the state declines by 10%, our relative share of the pie grows because we decline slower than everyone else. So that's positive. Now, there are many other factors, scarcity, density, rural, acre, there's rich, poor, there's many other factors in the equation, but the slice of the pie gets a little big. Now it's 0.00004 something is whatever our slice of the pie is, but it matters, right? So that would be helpful to us. Although, if you get 50 kids to come in, you have to wait quite a long time for new subsidy dollars to come in, right? So just that's kind of an aside, but an interesting one. All right, we talked about revenue. Any questions on the state? These are subsidies. We sort of get what we get. I can't really do much about the state subsidies other than try to maximize them to the ability we have. For example, transportation. We maximize that when we rebid our routes to pay at state formula to have the most reimbursable percentage possible. The health services, we make sure we capture all of the medical services we provide to capture the most possible. And we have a PIMS person who reports our data as accurately as possible to make sure that we're capturing those things. But we don't have control over these subsidies to the extent that we do over, say, real estate taxes. Yes?
Don't kill me. On the local revenue side, did the transfer tax, did that increase because of the real estate market?
It did. It most definitely did. Let's see, real estate transfer tax. So you see the actual 2021, we've never seen a number, 797,000. I don't know that we've ever hit 500,000 in the history of Abington Heights. I'd have to do a little more digging, but that was certainly an outlier. And as you can see, we're doing not as well, not quite as well this year, but we're doing pretty well here. So if we see that trend continue, see the $500,000 figure that I have budgeted for next year, if we see that continue and we are feeling confident about the next year, we'll boost that number. But as of right now, it's a little bit conservative. So. Okay, now onto the federal revenue breakdown. And again, a federal revenue is just, we sort of receive what we receive based on the formula. But the notable one that we discussed last time and will continue to discuss is the stimulus funds. And what we did here was we put together the timeline of when the funds will expire, right? So you can kind of see that timeline from 2021, what we received there, what we're receiving in the current year, 1.38 million, what we'll receive next year, 1.4 million, and then we see 700,000 fall off, where we're left with about 900,000, and then we'll see that money fall off by 2014, 2015. So we have a 2-year step down until there are no federal stimulus dollars left. So we showed a similar slide at the last budget meeting, so that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. And what does all that look like, and what does this all add up to or subtract from? Here's the math problem, right? So we have $51.6 million in revenue versus 54.2 in expenses. You have an asterisk there that includes a $250,000 budgeted reserve. So for a deficit of about $2.5 million, if you want to eliminate the budgetary reserve for purposes that it's not actually budgeted for, you have a $2.3 million deficit going forward. So we talked about tax increase in the current year, and we talked about the Act 1 index last time. I just wanted to sort of let you know about the Act 1 index and one vehicle that exists to go above the Act 1 index and what won't take you above the Act 1 index. So there are 4 referendum exceptions. 2 of them are not applicable, and they're both related to school construction. Grandfathered debt, which would have to be in place before, I think, 2006 or 2008, or school construction electoral debt. Electoral debt means voter-approved debt, which means you have to put it on the ballot in the primary for the voters to approve the project and the borrowing. And the last time a district did that and was successful, I believe it was 2014, State College School District did that. And there's a link there in the presentation that shows the whole outreach and the knocking on doors and the what they did to work with the voters to get that passed. The other vehicles that exist to go above an index in a given year are the special ed expenditures exception and the retirement contribution exception. So if you have a year where those costs go up very significantly, i.e. the current year, there is an opportunity to raise above the index. I will tell you, they're not big opportunities because you have to phase out the 3.4% and there's a phase out period. So you're not talking about millions of dollars in tax leviability. You're talking about maybe tens of thousands or maybe a couple $100,000 as the opportunity there. So the Act 1 index is really the ceiling that you're looking at here with, again, 2 minor exceptions. And wow, that really came out very small. To the question on what a mill is worth, I believe Mr. Fleming asked. A mill is worth $220,000 in revenue. 3.4% equals 4.17 mills, and 4.17 mills is approximately $815,000. To the average taxpayer, our median assessment's at $20,000. A 1 mil tax increase is $20, and a 4 mil tax increase is $80 a year. Yes.
What's our current millage rate?
122 in change.
122.
Okay. So what I did here is there's a million ways to do this in the software, but there's so many simulations we can run. But what I did here, just for consideration, is we have a software called Forecast 5. And this software allows you to take your current budget and also all of your actual figures, and it allows you to apply things like your salary contractual increases going forward. What are they going to be for the next 5 years, right? So it's defined for us already. We know that the CBA calls for 3%, so we're able to do that. We know what the pension rate is forecasted to be, so we plan for that. We make some assumptions on where healthcare will be. We made some conservative assumptions on that as to where we'll be 5 years from now. And so what we did here is I said, well, what would happen is if we kept everybody and did everything that we're saying we're going to do in the 22-23 budget, kept everybody, didn't add anybody, didn't take anybody away, didn't cut any supplies, didn't do anything, but we just kept going the way we're going to go. And we raised taxes once this year and then not again. What would that look like? Well, we would be out of general fund balance by 2025 under this model. And we would be negative $20 million by 2027. So that's without additional revenue measures after the fact, and that's without reducing costs. I call it status quo because it's just, you just let things play out on the plane that they're playing out, right? It does take advantage of the debt coming off the books. That does include the reduction in debt, also includes the reduction in the stimulus funds coming off the books. And you can see here in the revenue and expense changes year over year. In 2024, you see a 0.65% decrease in revenue. In 2025, you see a 1% decrease in revenue. And those are the stimulus funds coming off the books, right? And then you see the year-over-year changes in the expenses. And those two dips you see in 2025 and 2027, that's the debt coming off the books. So that's just one model. I can do any kind of model. Chris and I were running some simulations earlier this week on it. But this is one thing to consider. We're talking about conservative estimates, not crazy escalators in the budget. These are just historical averages. If we kept doing what we've always done, this is what it would, or kept doing what we're planning to do next year, this is what it would look like. Yes?
But we're not planning to just do what we always do. We're in the process of getting an RFP for a huge feasibility study. We know in 2 years we're going to have our salary increase that we're going to have to cover for. So if we think that just raising taxes is the only way that we are going to get revenue, we can't. We have to build another model. I mean, I would like to see what your chart would look like if we raised taxes every year and then added all the additional costs that we're looking to do and see how uneven it is just to continue to raise taxes.
Sure.
It is time for us to look at balancing that. Raising taxes is one thing that we have to do. We have to borrow funds. If we are going to look at doing all of these projects that have timelines of getting all the things, we have to have a timeline of how we're going to create revenue without it only being raising taxes.
And I don't think anyone here is suggesting that is the only solution. I'm saying that the other model is the other model I built is, again, not considering any new facilities project or new borrowing, which you do have to pay back, and we do not have that budgeted for. If you raise taxes 3% every year thereafter, you still do not catch up. You still will not break even. If you borrow funds and add on to your expenses, you'll be that much further behind.
Jim, just for the group's sake, right now, our debt, we're paying, I think, about $600,000 a year.
We have a bond that's about $700,000. We have a lease, which acts similar to a mortgage, is about $200,000.
So we're paying what, $200,000 or the $600,000?
You're paying about $900,000
each year.
$200K will come off the books 2 years from now, so you'll see relief in year 3.
Right.
And about $700.
And that bond was for how much to begin with?
Chris and I had a hard time tracking that one down. Could we refinance so many times, combined bonds, so many? It's hard. It's hard to say. We were down in the dusty archives.
But what I'm getting at is okay, we have a new thing, we're gonna go for a new bond, and you're looking at $900 to $1 million that you're gonna have to pay that off, depending on how large it is. So, that's also an expense that's not included in here, like what you're saying.
Yeah, that's the point. New money makes this chart more out of balance. Like taking on debt, we still have to pay. You increase your operational costs for presumably 30 years, and that we need to find a way to finance that.
So when do you think it's the right time to look at other streams of revenue when we are approving a major feasibility changes in our district? We're in the process of doing that right now, right? Of getting a huge study of all the changes and all the surveys we received from all of our different levels. And we've identified that we are going to be doing a lot of renovating. So when do you, as our business manager, think it's prudent time for us to start also looking at finding other streams of revenue other than raising taxes?
We're always looking for budget enhancements on the revenue side. We're always looking for ways to reduce expenses. That's my job. Whether those are palatable or not, but I think it's part of a larger discussion. Tonight we're focused on the 22-23 budget. There's a lot of discussion of what else may be going on. I am certainly not heading up those discussions. I will provide my guidance and insight into how I believe when these projects become defined, how we do that. But for me to stand up here today and tell you this is the plan for 5 years, I think would be a little irresponsible of me.
I think what it does do, though, is point out the trade-offs we're going to have to deal with when the facility study comes in, because they're going to have a lot of things in it, and we're going to have to look at that and say, what makes sense given the the financial future we have, and to Mrs. Tierney's point, what other revenue sources can we have? I mean, I think within a year or two, this group's going to have some difficult decisions and to work through on this, because obviously you can't do everything.
Resource allocation is a huge part of the hard decisions ahead. Again, this is a short-term thing to pass the budget, but to ignore the 5-year implications of this budget, which is no one's suggesting that anyone's ignoring the implications of this budget. I'm trying to highlight that there is a deficit, and that deficit is likely to continue absent revenue enhancements. I'm not standing here advocating for tax increases forever, or I'm just saying, based on the discussion and the dialogue of wanting to invest in our academic programs, wanting to invest in our facilities, we've reached an inflection point. We're spending considerably more this year than we ever have. We have more people than we've had, and so that's where the recommendation for tax increase comes from. Sort of reading the room and making an attempt to balance the budget to the extent that we can. There's a large gap there. There is. Yes.
So the summary page where you have the big numbers, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what your conclusions are. So the revenue that you have there, the 51.6 million, that includes the potential 3.4%.
It does.
And so the expenses that you've projected, even if we raised that, in this budget year, we would have a $2.5 million deficit, right?
That's correct.
So a year ago when we were together, and I did these numbers really fast when I went back through, but when we sat and looked at the budget last year, the projection, did we project a deficit last year?
We did.
And was it like about $1 million deficit, or did I get that math
A little bit
right?
larger than that. I could grab it off the website if you like.
No, that's fine. If it's about that.
We're
Okay.
currently operating on it's closer to $2 million deficit.
Right.
We're doing better than we expected on the revenue side.
Right.
I don't expect it to be that large of a deficit. The expense, we're filling out the expense side of the equation greater than we ever had in the past.
Right.
But the revenue side's coming in significantly stronger, given our conservative projections heading into the a COVID year.
Yep.
So we'll get some help on the revenue side. I don't know that we're going to get much help on the expense side. So we may very well break even if some of these trends continue.
You mean for this year?
For this
Yeah,
current
right.
year.
I got you.
But I really don't see it, given the trajectory. I don't see us continuing a surplus position into 22,
Right.
23.
And so last question, did I hear you right if you go back to that projection graph where you showed the deficit, if we when you say if revenues are not increased above status quo, I thought I heard you say that even if we increased taxes every year by that amount, we're still going to deplete? Is that what your model is showing?
This model, yeah. So, and again, this is absent any additional measures taken on the expense side.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, if everything just goes with the status quo and my inflationary assumptions are
Right.
correct.
Right.
Yeah, the bars would be closer together, but you would deplete slower
Right.
on a trajectory. Now, am I saying down to the penny, that's exactly what's going to happen? No, I mean, you see my prior.
Oh, no, I
budget.
know that. I'm just saying, generally speaking, though, like your status quo, on the expense, when you do your projections on the expense side, there, you have a lot of, I mean, you know what the expenses are for the most part. You can look at the last few years of history on the variable side, but we pretty much know our fixed expenses, our salaries, our benefits. But the revenue side, if we don't, I know there's a bunch of other small line items where, interest income can go up, and, there's other potential revenue, but the real estate tax revenue is the bulk of our revenues.
Wage tax as well, I would say.
And wage tax. So even if we don't raise tax, in the past 10 years, since you've been here for a while, so do our revenues at the local level, even in years when we don't raise taxes, those can vary, significantly based on earned income and whether there's development in the community and other factors, right?
Yes, so some years you'll see as much as maybe 0.4% of millage appreciation, which is fairly significant. That'll get you,
Right.
$75,000, $100,000
Right.
additional revenue. But on the wage tax side, you'll see in good economic times, you'll see, an upward trend of maybe $500,000.
Right.
So I think the low in recent years is about 3 million, and we're, I think, around 4.5-ish now. So that can go up, but that
Right.
one's much more variable.
Right.
We tend to have a very stable tax base here, both in terms of wage and real estate.
Yep.
We're very diversified. We don't have one large, distribution center or something
Right.
that if it went out of business, we would be out $1 million in revenue or something. But
Right.
so we're pretty diversified. But yes, they're still variable.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
My last question, the preliminary budget summary, the expenses, does that include our short-term projects?
The short-term project is expected to be funded through the capital reserve. I should have put that in this one as well. I can, it's in the slide that I presented at the last meeting, but that is projected to be paid out of our capital reserve fund, which after the technology projects and the roof, we should have about 5 million remaining to cover that project.
Those numbers are not in the deficit because they aren't an expense item. They're coming out of the
Reserve.
reserve.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Mr. Mirabelli, very nice job. Thank you. Dr. Schaefer, we ready for public comments?
I think we are.
Okay. I don't think we have cards, but we do? You want to take a 5-minute break? All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Let people catch up, and so we'll convene again at 8:05 or 8:10. Okay, the next part of our meeting is public comment. Amy Scandell. Welcome back.
Dad's at work a couple times. I guess my schedule changed. Thanks for having me. Amy Scandell, Waverly. You know, I've only been in the district for 3 years, and it's always been stated how fiscally responsible Abington Heights is, and, you know, the tax base and all that. Well, tonight's a little bit different here, and I'm very concerned that the word that didn't come up tonight was inflation. We know everything is skyrocketing. I hear, you know, we're budgeting for all these short-term projects, but we're buying at the highest cost for everything right now, it sounds like. I mean, I think we almost need to put on the brakes here and look. I'm very, very concerned as a parent, a taxpayer. Yes, buildings need to be safe. I think we start with buildings, safety. But, I mean, we want new turf fields, we want new athletic fields, we want a new stand. I just am really, really concerned what Mr. Marabelli said. It looks like we're heading, you know, you said fiscal cliff a month ago. Well, I think we're going to be heading there, even with raising taxes. So I think we really, really have to pause. And we can have the projects out there and kind of look at them, but I think we have to choose what we have to tackle. And with that said, I was wondering, our capital reserve, are we going to basically deplete that then? I mean, you don't have to answer that right now, but that kind of came to mind, because if it's going to go down to 5 million with some of these short-term projects. But I think we really need to pause on all these projects and truly look at what the future holds, because Abington Heights has been fiscally responsible and always in the green for years. And I mean, we can blame COVID, but we can't really, because they gave us money. And I was worried about the ESSR3 money. We cannot become dependent upon that. It's gone in 3 years. So I would highly consider the board really looking at these projects before you pass anything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maggie Roberts.
Good evening. I'm Maggie Roberts from Clark Summit. And I wanted to address two things that I've discovered while talking to a friend at another school district. And the sheet that I just passed out is part of their health and safety plan from another Pennsylvania school district. So if you could look at item J, it talks about securely auditor, which monitors electronic communication of students for social emotional issues or interventions. I was wondering if you could please let me know if Abington has any software like this already that monitors students' electronic devices for certain words or images, or if they're planning to purchase anything like this in the future. I don't know if anybody knows that offhand, but. No? Okay. All right. So the other letter is under the E, where it says, hold on. The professional development of SEL. I was just wondering if there's any planned professional development of SEL training, and if there's any planned purchases for SEL curriculum that you guys are going to be using. And since I still have time, since I didn't, you guys didn't have an answer for the first one, Dr. Schaefer, with that survey that you were talking in regards to about the improvements and everything, you said the constituents, and I'm just wondering if that's all taxpayers in the community, or is that just the students and parents and the teachers that are just in the buildings right now?
Students, parents, and teachers in the buildings.
Okay, just because I feel like if, I think Mr. Marabelli said, if it was put on a voter, ballot, obviously you've seen in past years how it's been turned down. And I think as taxpayers, because I didn't get the survey. I'm not part of this. I'm part of the school district, but my kids don't go to school there. I would say that, like Amy said, it's not fiscally responsible. We have secure buildings. Maybe they need to be updated, but to, build brand-new buildings or whatever. We're trying to keep up with the Joneses, and I don't think that that's even, I think that's just silly at this point. If it's gonna put us, you know, in a really bad state with our finances, then it's silly. You know, because out of date, I know a lot of parents responded to that, like, oh, they're out of date, you know, it looks so silly, the circle building. Well, who cares? If it doesn't mean it's not functional, you know, and many kids have gone through the system. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Mr. Mirabelli or Dr. Schaefer, you want to try and field some of the questions, or you want to get back to them?
Ms. Roberts, you can, if you can email me at schaefer@ahsd.org, and then I can email you my phone number. We do not have a bring your own device school district-wide where I see a lot of issues in districts relative to something that you highlighted here. We provide devices with a lot of different filters and security measures on them. I don't know what this is, but I'll call you, but I'm not aware of anything close to this other than our standard filters that we would have that students aren't able to Google search for X, Y, Z in our buildings or go to certain sites, that type of thing.
So while they're on your network,
Correct,
correct?
yeah, right. And as far as SEL, can you tell me what you mean by SEL?
The social emotional learning, like curriculum and everything, and how the teachers are trained in this. It was just how it was
Ye-
viewed. It says the professional development of SEL.
Yeah, I think I can tell you from my experience as a school counselor, assistant principal, and principal that folks like school psychologists, social workers, school counselors, people involved in student assistance program go through, in some cases, mandatory professional development that's required. Some are voluntary professional development that would be relative to their work. We don't have anything, any purchases of curriculum for that. Nothing like that. Jim, do you want to explain a little bit about, again, I think this has come up a couple times, using funds for capital reserve, and then perhaps, what funds in the general fund can be earmarked for construction and that type of thing?
Sure, so the capital reserve balance, and again, this, I believe, was presented at the last meeting, and this slide deck is available on the Business Administrator website. There's about, let's say, $5.5 million in the capital reserve fund now. We're working on South Abington Elementary's roof, and we're doing a couple of technology infrastructure projects, two of which we will receive back federal E-rate funding to help defray the cost. We'll spend roughly $500,000 on those combined 4 projects, which leaves about $5 million to fund any short-term projects which were outlined earlier and in prior meetings. Should there be a cost overrun there, we do have a general fund balance, which, as you can see on the current plane, would be eaten up under status quo. But if there was a cost overrun or a capital need, such as if the capital reserve balance was depleted and we had a major system failure, there would be some general fund dollars available to take care of that capital need. Was that the genesis of the question?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Schaefer, let's move to the action and discussion items, please.
Okay, at this time, I would ask Mr. Acker if you would consider the personnel action items. A retirement.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karen?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
And Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
Mr. Acker, I ask the board to consider for approval items B and C, and for our members out listening to us and out in the audience, we are actually approving once again the 21-22 school year calendar due to the most recent inclement weather. So that's why that is on there at this late time in May. Normally, this would just be for approving the 22-23 calendar. So request approval for items B and C.
We have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karen?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
And Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
Before I go on to the next action item, for those that are listening to us on YouTube and in front of us, we're in a process of developing job descriptions. So from this point forward, you will be seeing job descriptions on many of the action items. This does not mean that we don't have those positions. We are just creating updated job descriptions. So I want to make sure that we provided clarity there. Mr. Acker, I ask the board consider item D, numbers 1, 2, and 3 for approval.
Motion, please.
So moved. Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Karen?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
And Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
Mr. Acker, I ask that the board consider a motion to approve the revised final quote from Integra as contained in item 6, that is commonly referred to as our server farm.
Have a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Mr. Medensky?
Phil, can I impose on you to explain a little bit more about what you had, the addition of the benefits that you had mentioned once before?
Sure. So it's really 3 parts. There's storage costs, there's server costs, and there's services that link all of them together. And so what this allows the district to do is to utilize space and storage appropriately. We are woefully behind, so far behind. I'll give you one. There's a lot of examples, but I'll give you one. We couldn't really upgrade some of our operating systems because we didn't have space. And now this will give us the storage needed to do those things. And so we're ready to, to move forward technology-wise. The added benefit in going through this is it also provides a backup of what is, so in case there's a disaster recovery. Now, the backup is with the server farm, so it's on site, but that's a much better place than where we were. So I think this really gets us to a point where we should have been for years. And the looking at the storage costs, the server costs, and the services actually is very, very affordable considering what they're going to be doing. And that was one of the reasons why we recommended the vendor we did. So this is a good thing for us. And it ties to our roadmap where, if you remember, we did the main switch a couple months ago. This is the second step. And then the third step, which we'll lay off for a while, but we had our website, but also that we have to look at devices now, because now we're up where we should be. So I think this is the second big part of where we want to be. This is a stopgap. I think when we do our roadmap, and by the way, it's June 1st is when our next IT committee is, and we're going to look at where we want to be in the future so we can better plan, better budget. But this is the second step of a stopgap measure.
Mr. Robeson, will this include training and
Yes, so Chris, for Chris Suma and the technical team, yeah.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
And Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
Mr. Acker asks that the board consider a motion to approve the agreement between Abington Heights School District and the Bucks County Intermediate Unit 22 to provide services as contained in item 7.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
No.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
And Mr. Medensky?
No.
Motion passes 7-2. Thank you.
Mr. Acker asks the board consider a motion to approve the Act 93 compensation plan as contained in item number 8.
Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
On the motion? I'd like to thank Dr. Schaefer and his crew and the negotiating committee on working on this. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Tierney?
Yes.
Mr. Acker?
Yes.
Mr. Abdallah?
Yes.
Mr. Azar?
Yes.
Mr. Fleming?
Yes.
Mrs. Henderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Karam?
Yes.
Mr. Medensky?
Yes.
Mr. Robeson?
Yes.
Motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
The next would be informational meetings. I don't think we have any informational items. Do you have any new business, old business? Mr. Robeson?
Mr. Acker, just two things. One is, I know historically we've, it might have been 2 years now, we've included Stop the Bleed program as, I think it was an in-service, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that, with turnover and everything, that's just something I think, which actually we used it. Unfortunately, we had to use some of the items in the kit that we had. But if we could, I know there's spaces at premium for instruction and in-service time, but if we could consider Stop the Bleed, I don't think we have to do it every year, but I think that would be a good thing to do.
That's actually part of the risk assessment that was conducted by the state police and one of the recommendations that we're going to be focusing on. And I know Mr. Mirabelli and I have a conversation about that tomorrow.
And then the second thing is, for the policy subcommittee, if you could please take a look at the policy for if and/when we are hit with ransomware and what our policy should be when that happens. I know we talked at a high level, but it would be, I think everybody would feel more comfortable if there was a policy when it happens. That's all.
That's good, very good point. Mrs. Henderson?
I just wanted to say that the curriculum committee met with the district curriculum team of Dr. Vitale, Mrs. Fromfelker, and Mrs. Pryl today to review the proposed comprehensive ELA program, curriculum program K through 12 to be implemented for the 22-23 school year. I just wanted to note the tremendous amount of care that went into planning that. So we're looking to review that and vote on that on the May 18th meeting. So thank you.
Mrs. Tierney?
And we appreciate your support, so thank you.
Okay, anything else? The motion for adjournment. Thank you all. Yes, excuse me, we have time for more public comments. This is a work session. good for now? Okay, thank you all. Yeah, I heard you make that.
Motion to adjourn.